Welcome to this explainer. So, for decades, the Bermuda Triangle has been, without a doubt, one of the most enduring, sensational pop culture phenomenons out there. You know the legend, right? That treacherous stretch of ocean between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico where ships and planes just vanish into thin air. We've blamed it on everything: sea monsters, lost civilizations, even rogue alien activity. But here's what we're going to unpack today. When researchers actually went back and looked at the hard data, a completely different, firmly grounded story emerged.
Let's dive right in. Pop culture tells us this area is basically a hotspot for the supernatural. It's flashy, it's spooky, and hey, it makes for a fantastic movie plot. But when we take those wild claims and cross-reference them with actual, official maritime and aviation records, the whole mystery kind of just evaporates. The truth is, the Bermuda Triangle was actually solved decades ago. We're going to look at exactly how the facts were twisted to create this modern mythology and what actually happened to the people who disappeared out there.
Because you see, this isn't some ancient maritime curse. It's actually a mid-20th century media invention. The whole thing really kicks off in 1945 with the tragic disappearance of Flight 19. But get this, the region didn't even have a name until 1964, when a writer named Vincent Gaddis coined the term Bermuda Triangle in a magazine article. Then, in 1974, the idea absolutely exploded into the mainstream thanks to a best-selling book by Charles Berlitz. Literally 1 year later, in 1975, researcher Larry Cush completely solved it. But by then, the legend had already spread like wildfire.
Section 1. Flight 19. The real story.
To really grasp how this myth got so out of hand, we have to look at the absolute cornerstone of the legend. December 1945. 5 U.S. Navy torpedo bombers vanished during a training exercise. Now, popular retellings frame this as totally inexplicable, often claiming they disappeared in perfectly calm skies. But the official Navy records tell a much more tragic human story. The flight's lead instructor actually had a known history of getting disoriented, and radio transmissions proved the crew got lost, believing their compasses were busted. On top of that, the weather was rapidly getting worse. They didn't vanish into another dimension. They simply ran out of fuel and had to ditch in a stormy open ocean. It completely flips the paranormal narrative on its head.
And then there's the rescue plane. This is the detail that always hooks people. A rescue plane goes out to find them, and it vanishes too. But the reality? That rescue seaplane was a completely different type of aircraft, one that actually had a heavily documented history of fuel vapor explosions. And it wasn't an invisible disappearance at all. A merchant ship in the area literally watched a mid-air explosion, perfectly consistent with that exact type of aircraft, happen right after it took off. It's a tragically mundane explanation based on a known fatal defect.
Section 2. Missing ships, misplaced boats. So let's shift our focus from the sky down to the water. This brings us to the famous maritime pillars of the myth. Take 3 of the most famous ships swallowed by the Triangle: the USS Cyclops in 1918 and 2 sister ships, the Proteus and Nereus, in 1941. TV specials will tell you they vanished without a single distress signal, but all 3 ships were carrying the exact same cargo, an incredibly heavy load of manganese ore. Naval historians don't look at that and see a curse. They see a clear, undeniable pattern. It points directly to a structural weakness in that specific class of ship when loaded with that specific heavy material. The pattern repeated across decades, totally independent of any regional magic.
And then honestly, there are cases where it seems like the authors didn't even look at a map. Take the infamous ghost ship, the Mary Celeste. It's constantly tied to the Bermuda Triangle. Well, she was found adrift near the Azores Islands. For those checking their geography, that is in the eastern Atlantic Ocean. That is nowhere near the Bermuda Triangle. It's almost comical, right? Yet this blatant factual error has been repeated in countless books and shows for decades, just to add one more spooky ship to the list.
Section 3. Solving the Bermuda Mystery. Which brings us to the massive turning point. How did we finally figure all this out? Well, it all comes down to a librarian and researcher named Larry Cush in 1975. He basically acted as a whistleblower. He found that several incidents commonly presented as mysterious had actually happened during recorded storms or hurricanes. The authors just conveniently left that part out. Cush did what almost no one else was doing. He bypassed the sensational paperbacks and went straight back to the original shipping records, the original weather reports, and the official military documents.
What he found was that the public was being fed a curated mystery. These popular retellings are deliberately ignoring equipment failures and literally erasing weather reports. Because, let's be real, a boat sinking in a storm doesn't sell millions of books. The original records showed recorded storms, inexperienced crews, and genuine navigational errors. The mystery only existed because writers were actively omitting the boring details to craft a blockbuster narrative.
And if you're still skeptical, just look at the statistical reality from the people who literally track this for a living. Lloyd's of London, one of the largest maritime insurance firms on the planet, and the U.S. Coast Guard have both definitively weighed in. There is absolutely no higher rate of unexplained disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle than in any other heavily trafficked stretch of ocean of the same size. When you factor in the massive, and I mean massive, volume of traffic moving between the U.S., the Caribbean, and South America, the accident rate is entirely normal.
Section 4. The real ocean dangers. Now, that doesn't mean the area is perfectly safe. Far from it. There are genuine, naturally occurring hazards out there. Let's ground this in some hard navigational science. The Bermuda Triangle is one of the few places on Earth that experiences something called agnostic variation. It's a rare phenomenon where your compass actually points toward true north instead of magnetic north. Today with GPS, no big deal. But put yourself in the shoes of a pilot or sailor 50 years ago, maybe unfamiliar with this weird regional quirk, you could genuinely misjudge your heading. That leads to very real, completely explainable navigational errors that could send you hundreds of miles off course over the open ocean.
Then add the natural geographic hazards to the mix. This region sits directly along the Gulf Stream. That is an incredibly fast, totally unpredictable ocean current that can swiftly swallow up and erase any evidence of a water landing or shipwreck. It's also an area notorious for fast-forming violent storms and frequent hurricanes. These are completely natural weather and water phenomena, and they significantly increase the real risk of accidents. You really don't need unexplained forces to sink a ship when you're dealing with rapid, hurricane-force winds and the Gulf Stream.
So, what's the big takeaway here? The Bermuda Triangle is not a supernatural mystery. It's simply one of the busiest, stormiest stretches of ocean in the world. The real culprits all along were just nature, tragic human error, and a ridiculously high volume of traffic. Once you put those missing weather reports back into the stories and acknowledge the mechanical failures that those writers deliberately ignored to make a quick buck, the mystery completely vanishes.
Which leaves us with this final, honestly fascinating question to think about. Why do we prefer a supernatural mystery over the tragic, boring truth? This explainer isn't just about lost ships and planes. It's really about human nature. We seem perfectly hardwired to prefer inventing these sensational, captivating legends instead of just accepting the mundane realities of the world. I mean, it's a lot more fun to imagine alien abductions than to read a localized weather report, right? Next time you hear a wild, unbelievable claim, remember the triangle. Ask yourself, what boring details might have been left out of the story? Thanks for exploring this with me today.